to guarantee the quality of the result. There's something still in there when we talk about function. Isn't function a kind of spiritual thing? You can't touch a function. You can only construct it and believe in it, like faith in the divine. Functionalism needs to be questioned critically, I think, in its essentialism. There's a bit of the Holy Spirit moving there. However, I digress. That's for another day. The industry these days works a lot with machine translation. More so, well, what's happening, as I'll explain later, machine translation and translation memories are coming together, and it's very important to judge the quality of machine translations and to try different algorithms to raise the quality. So in that little bit of the industry work, we have another discourse on quality where the concept of 100% quality actually operates. And the 100% quality in, for example, the Bleu score, bilingual evaluation, is that whatever a human translates is 100% quality. The aim of the machine is to get to where the human is, and therefore, just by being human, you're 100% quality, which is lovely, isn't it? We've all got it automatically. But you can understand what they're talking about. They're talking about blatant errors that are miles away from what any right-minded person would do. Okay? The same for the TER score, translation error rate. Here, they judge it by estimating what a human would do there, how many changes a human would make to bring this machine translation output to an acceptable human translation level. What's happening here? Well, the difference between machine and human is so great that 100% is an ideological value attached to the human. What's actually happening, of course, is rather like the Turing test. The Turing test is to get automatic translations to the point where if you give that translation to a reader and a human translation to the reader, it's not that they're 100% perfect, it's that the reader cannot tell which one's human. Okay, and that's really the aim of machine translation. It's this inability to tell which is machine and which is human that is associated with the 100%. Still, though, it sits there in the discourse. The attachment to the source text, however, remains strong, just in the way we're working. This is translation memory. What is it? That's deja vu. It doesn't matter these days. They all look the same. Trados will give you the same two columns. You've got your start text on the left, your target text on the right, and you get the matches coming up and the glossary matches. Just the way it's set out, just the way it's designed, just the way the segmentation operates, says you will translate to stick to the start text. So that 100% human quality really means 100% ability to follow the start text. It's quite hard to, you can merge segments and split them, but it requires extra effort. Another thing in the industry is a grid for evaluating translations. This comes from LISA, the Localization Industry Standards Association, now defunct, but the grid lives on. And this is just the form that you have to fill out the way you're evaluating a translation. And what's interesting in it is, as you might be able to see, that maximum error points allowed for this text, which has 2,100 words, 21. You're allowed to make mistakes. In the industry, there is awareness that mistakes happen and a certain number are tolerable because you have to go fast. You have to produce huge numbers of words. However, not each error is at the same level. As you can see here, perhaps a minor error is 1 point, a major error is 5 points, which is a big gap, okay? And then a critical error means you lose all 21 plus 1. That is, you fail. So some errors are so critical that you cannot make them or the whole thing goes down the drain. Others are tolerable, 1-point errors, who cares? Hey, come on, that's just really human. And then in between them, you have the 5-pointers, which you would not want to make. In 2,000 words, you can make 4 of them and get away with it. This is interesting because it's actually used. It's not used on a whole project. You would sample it, you would take bits and pieces from it, and then do that analysis. And it's implicitly functional. The people who drew this up use the terms critical and major, but never say exactly what it means. Critical for what? Major with respect to what? And it must be with respect to the purpose of the translation. It must have that inspiration there, but the industry discourse isn't going to elaborate that in any major way. So there's a certain functionalism there. It's also assumed that the human reviser can pick this up in a mathematical way, that the necessary intuition is converted into mathematical language. And the important thing is it allows for imperfections. So much for the 100% quality that people answer in their discourse. It's not applied in what's actually done. Finally, almost finally, the industry has another kind of discourse on quality, and it comes from what I mentioned as being the nature of the profession and the idealization of the professional. Here, they realize that it takes too much work to evaluate all the translations. If you get out into industry, you're producing, especially with machine translation and translation memory, you're producing huge quantities of text. Often you're updating prior translations. Nobody can sit down and evaluate all of that. And even just sampling, for every 20,000 words, I'll take 500 and evaluate that. Even that takes too much time and effort. I don't know if you're aware of this. My university at the moment is going, for some years has been trying to tell us that we are a system and we have to be a quality system. What does a quality system do? It controls itself, right? So if you've got a system, all the people working in the university, part of that system will be the people who control the quality of what everybody else does. And so if it's 10%, 1 in 10 is assessing the quality of that, okay, the system can survive quite well. So I have some little bureaucrat there who gets all my courses. I have to do the competence analysis. What skills am I doing? What competencies? How do I evaluate them? Etc. I have to do that planning every year. And some bureaucrat goes along, have I done this? Yes, have I done this? Yes, 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 yes. Therefore, my courses will have quality. Is it rubbish? Of course it's rubbish. You just tick the boxes and then you do what you always did beforehand. Okay, but the system can handle that unless you get up to 40 or 50% of the system, which is controlling the rest of the system, and then it's too expensive. The system can no longer function because there are more people controlling its quality than are actually doing the job. And this is where my university is getting to at the moment. There are so many people controlling us, we've forgotten how to teach. Here, happily, you seem to have wonderful lack of control. Here's some guys, go and teach them. Do something there. Perhaps I speak too early. Okay. All right, so quality in that view becomes not just an ideal to attain, but a cost. If I'm going to get top quality teaching, the system is going to have to allocate a whole lot of its energy into creating that and measuring that and maintaining it. How can we reduce that cost? Sampling translations is far too expensive and subjective. So the industry discourse in quality management systems is to control the process and not the product. Instead of looking at translations, we will look at the way translations are done. So you get these industrial standards, especially 1538, European Quality Management for Language Service Providers, which insists that in a company using this standard, every translation will be revised by the translator and then reviewed by a second professional other than the translator. It's assumed that if you have a revision and then an external review, the quality will be increased. End of story. It also has some indications or rules about who the translator must be. They should have a degree from a program like this or certain years of experience. Our profession is not regulated by degrees. It's regulated really by experience. Forget about the product, too difficult. Control the process. So what do people do? The companies sign up to this. They apply it. The cost of their translations is slightly higher because they do have to pay for a second revision or a review. And with it, they can offer their customer a certain guarantee of quality. It's like the person you buy that used car from. They can't tell you what's under there. They're probably not a mechanic either, but they can give you this certificate saying that we have carried out these checks, and here is a certificate to prove it. Trust me and trust this bit of paper. Trust that standard. That's the quality. Quality has moved from what's in the actual thing to a signal of trustworthiness, about which I'll have more to say next time. So I hope to have got across these points. The notion of accuracy in our tradition is very much attached to a text, but in actual practice, people are not looking at the text, they're looking at other things. They're making assumptions about the perfection of humans, but in practice, they're recognizing that all of us make mistakes, and that if they're not critical, that's okay. Okay? So these articles of faith are all very relative. In practice, they don't talk about functions, but they're assuming functions as soon as they say what's critical or what's high level or high risk. And in practice, they're talking about the quality of translations, but they're not doing that. They're actually trying to control the process because it's cheaper to do it. That's, I think, where our industry discourses on translation have got to little by little. This has reached the point where Roberto Beninatto, who has had various functions, he was one of the founders of a research agency called Common Sense Advisory. In 2007, he argued that he didn't say quality is a load of rubbish, but he almost said that. He said that no translation company should try to sell quality because the client can't tell. If all the translation companies say they give 100% quality, it's like saying they're translation companies. It's not a selling point, and the client will not be able to distinguish between you. Customers will always expect perfection. We know we can never give it, so what is this confidence trick we're trying to play? Quality doesn't sell, so don't sell on quality. I am citing him. And his recommendation to the companies is that they should differentiate on the service they provide. That is, forget about quality, talk about specialized in certain fields, talk about how fast you could do it, talk about how your process is different, talk about anything else, because nobody even knows what quality is anymore in industry. And this created some storms, but I think he got to a grain of truth. I would want to rewrite, I've given you the link there if you don't believe me. I would want to rewrite his statements a little in a slightly different way, but I think he's basically correct. I think text-based quality has become too expensive to measure. That's the real problem. It's not that clients can't tell, but it takes a lot of money to find out. You have to really find a second translator to talk about the first translators. Do you know what they always do? I don't know if this has happened to you. It happened to me once in a while. I'm coming back to this. I had a really good... My client was the local government in Catalonia, the Generalitat. Good, big paying client, great. I really work hard, first translation. I do 2, 3, I have 7 revisions. This is going to be good. And what they did to check on me, they gave it to a second translator. Okay? And any translator who, in that market, anyone can find a difference. For example, I said the current edition, no, I said the present edition of the book. I had to update a book, okay? And the other guy came along and said, no, it shouldn't be present, it should be current. Und so weiter. And then, I don't know, all the little things. It was obvious he was stealing my client from me. He was finding mistakes that are not real. Well, possible variation in English, there's a lot. And he was just going through it, saying, this is a load of rubbish. Don't employ that person. Give it to me. Okay, so I went in there with a dictionary. I said, no, look, you can do it. This was before the internet. You can say this. I can say this. It's in my authority had to become a dictionary. Anyway, I won the client. I kept the client. Okay, but this idea of measuring quality objectively in industry is very tricky and can lead to some very non-ethical business practices, which I hope you never have to encounter, as I have. Anyway, it's too expensive to measure. For the first time, this client, an important client, did assess me by giving it to another translator. Or if you get a job in especially the United Nations system, the United Nations institutions, as a junior translator, you will have a reviser who will revise what you do for 2 years and give you feedback until you learn their jargon, their style sheet, exactly the way it's done in the United Nations system. You really learn on the job. That's expensive, but they produce a very high quality, highly trained translator. Okay? Outside of that, in general life, quality, the cost of quality is a problem. Customers will pay to believe in quality, missing an S there, because it's better to believe in it, it's more efficient to believe in it than to actually check it. And so what they're looking for are the signals of quality and not quality itself. I actually, years ago, I wrote a book trying to give practical advice, but it was before I got into the discourse of signals of quality. But I did say things like, when you have a big project and you're communicating via email with your client, always go and see them in person so they know who you are. Okay, your personal presence, personal contact will make them remember you and trust you because you look like a person. Somehow people inspire more quality than an email address. Okay? And then I said, on days when you have a hangover, always wear a suit and tie. For men, I haven't got a hangover today. That appearances do matter. The formatting of the translation shouldn't matter to its quality, but it does matter a hell of a lot. I remember now why I got the client. I was the first translator in Barcelona to have a laser printer. Oh, that. Okay, this is going back, laser printer. They didn't know what was in it. It just looked good. Yes. Okay, so we produce, my God, I did this quickly. We produce and sell signals of quality, and part of our personal system should be invested in the signals. They are important. It does matter what you sound like, what you look like, how human you are, how well you communicate with your clients, if not your readers. I don't want to go there. I'd now like to shift gears a little. That's for the industry. I'm going to pick up on that later when I talk about the way the translation industry is working and the way it will work in the future. I shift then into economic analysis, okay? People working in conference interpreting have attacked this problem in an entirely different way, which I find interesting. The fact that written translation is attached to an industry, and we tend to follow what's happening in the industry and make do as best we can. In conference interpreting, the overlap with the training institutions is much greater. And so we have a far keener awareness of what's actually happening there. Franz Purchaker, you might know, as a professor at this august institution, is one of a number of people, Ingrid Kurz, I think the first one, who carried out surveys among conference interpreters to see what they think is most important in conference interpreting. So they're not asking, they're not asking the clients or the users, wait a minute, let's find it here. They're not asking the clients or the users. They're not asking about production, the way the interpreter works in the booth. If you get these different kinds of norms, they're actually talking about expectancy norms. What kinds of things do we expect a good interpreter to do? Okay, we might ask the same things. If a translation is good, what kinds of things would we expect it to do? What are the things that are more important or less important? Nobody's asked that question for written translations that I know of. But they have asked it for conference interpreting, and they've got some interesting results. Here are the values that they put up when they asked the questions. Consistency with the original. We're fixed on the start text, we know that. Okay? The same for there. Completeness of information, they would like that, but they recognize it's not possible in conference interpreting. Something is going to be left out. Logical cohesion, also rates quite highly. Fluency of delivery is a little further down. Correct grammar, correct terminology, appropriate style, right down to having a native accent, which is the least important. Which is interesting. I always felt very good translating out of English, or interpreting out of English, because of my strong English accent when I speak any language. I thought that was right, because the speaker, usually if somebody was speaking in English, I would be back there going into French or into Spanish with my strong English accent. I thought, well, that's appropriate, because the speaker's English anyway. Not that I pronounced the accent or made it worse, but still. Okay, so we find that in one of the surveys here, 286 subjects, that's quite a lot of people. We get that list of preferences. These are important. So we could rephrase and say, what's important for quality? What is quality? How does it manifest itself? Consistency with the original. Okay, right down to native accent. And then Zwischenberger, Purchaker, 2010, 704 subjects. That's huge. Get something slightly different. There are different subjects, though. The one that's different is completeness of information. I wonder if this happens. Does it? No. Okay. Here, completeness of information jumps write down. So it depends how you define completeness, and that's a problem of how you ask the question or the survey. It's, I think, a technical thing. What interests me is that I had a student do exactly the same survey in Brazil. It's just a pilot. She was thinking of doing a doctorate on this, so it's just a pilot, okay? Go and see what happens. And she got completely different results. Logical cohesion, which is number 3 in Italy, or around Italy, and number 2 for the 704, basically European and North American. In Brazil, logical cohesion goes down to number 7. Completeness of information goes down to number 9. Okay? And correct terminology is up, but grammar is good. The one that goes right up to the top is, oh dear, this one here. Fluency of delivery, number 1. So, in some countries, fluency is not important at all. It's down at number 4 or 3. But in Brazil, it's up at number 1. Okay? And the native accent also moves up considerably on the list. One gets the impression that in Brazil, quality is very different from quality in Europe and North America, which might be the case. Forget about cohesion, forget about the source text, just keep the rhythm flowing and make it sound good, like a great samba or a Rio Carnival or something. I beg forgiveness to all Brazilians. But what was interesting in the survey was the idea that quality may be highly dependent on the culture. It may depend on what's important for a particular culture. How tolerant are you of irregular rhythm, irregular intonation? How tolerant is your culture of foreign accents in your language? These are very sensitive areas that do change a lot according to where you are.